Hey, Frankie, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary of the PSI Effect podcast. And I know we've been talking about doing something special for that big event. I know I'm excited about it when I think about what it took for us to get everything off the ground. But hey, what do you think about that? What should we do?
I mean, it's amazing that it's been that long already. Seems like we just got started and we're almost at the 1 year mark. But I think it would be great if we could incorporate our listeners, people that have been impacted. I'd love to hear from
Ooh,
some
that's
of the
good.
people we've that's been impacted by the podcast in positive ways, and hear how they've been able to glean some good stuff from the podcast, and maybe even come on and join us as we get ready to celebrate the 50th episode.
That is fantastic. I like that idea. Well, y'all heard it. Frankie's just invited you to come on the podcast and share your experiences that you have had listening to us over the last year. So if you're interested in doing that, just drop us a DM on any of the social platforms where you find us, and we can reach out and see if we can get something set up and get you on this podcast and share with others like yourself and help others to find their way to positive experiences as well.
Yeah. And with that, enjoy the upcoming episode.
Setbacks are temporary, but comebacks, they are legendary. Welcome back to the PSI Effect, where we pause, shift, and ignite purpose that speaks louder than your past. This is Nuge, and together with Frankie, we're your hosts in this space, and your comeback starts now.
Hello, and welcome back to the PSI Effect podcast. I'm here with Frankie, and we are your hosts in the space of the PSI Effect podcast. We are glad that you are here sharing in this time with us. I think we have a really good conversation for you today, all surrounded by the topic of apologies.
Mm.
And that should be really interesting as we get going. But before we do, as always, we got Frankie in the house to tell us what's going on. And before you do that, man, I'm just a little bummed that I heard one of my football players, one of the young quarterbacks, cornerbacks, I should say. He's only been in the league for I think about 3 years.
Mm.
But got arrested down in Florida for some pretty serious charges, and he
Yikes.
is denying the charges, and I'm hoping that that is true because, man, we've been building this team, and I'm looking forward to having a good year. This year we kind of fell apart last year toward the end, but he was intended to be a pretty good part of that plan for this year. So I doubt that he will be playing for us this year, but I hope everything works out.
Man,
I hope he definitely has not been involved. And if he has been, it's just a sad state of affairs for that young man. Despite the fact that, the team will suffer that loss.
almost feels like those Detroit Lions have some sort of bad mojo or curse going on around them. It's always something.
Man, I tell you what, I don't want to say it's a curse, but if the way the Detroit Tigers are playing this year, I don't know. Could very well be.
Man, well, we'll see. And yeah, I'm with you. Hopefully that young man is innocent. And if he's not, then he's going to have to deal with the consequences of that. But if he is innocent, the thing that I really hope for too is that his exoneration is full, because many times we see these athletes, they might catch a charge or something like that. And even if they're found not guilty, this stigma and this shadow and this cloud hangs
Mhm.
over them because people are judging. People are like, oh, well, he got arrested for this, that, and the other, but the charges were dropped.
Right.
And where's the redemption arc? Where's the innocent until proven guilty? So I hope that those things can flow in his direction in a positive way.
Yeah, we're hoping for a positive outcome, but you never know with these things until the investigations are done and so forth. So we'll just have to see what's going on. So with that, sir, what you want to drop on the audience? What's happening in your world?
Well, I'll keep it in the sports arena. My sons and I were watching the NBA draft, so we're recording this episode right after the NBA draft concluded, and of course we were watching to see where our guy from Carolina, Caleb Wilson, where he was going to land in the draft, and we were excited about that. And of course, we were trying to will Boozer further and further down the draft order since he is from the school we shall not name, but that's real. But no, congratulations to all those young men, and it's going to be interesting to see how they transition into the league, because this was a really packed draft class, and I enjoy watching NBA basketball, especially during playoff time. So it'll be interesting to see how these players are able to contribute. And man, all the trades going on, I was flipping out
Oh man,
when Milwaukee traded Giannis to Miami, and then you got the Hornets trading Lonzo Ball. Man, it's going to be a brand new league come this season.
it really is. And there's some rumor that the Pistons are positioning maybe for LeBron. So we'll see.
Whoo! Oh my goodness.
We shall see.
Father time.
Telling you. Well, listen, man, let's jump into it. I know our audience is waiting with bated breath on this episode about apology. And I think it is a timely episode because at some point in time, we all have something to apologize for and some folks that we need to apologize to.
Mm.
And so, I think that this is a timely episode for everyone that is listening. And, a lot of times I think we think that apology, that holding that apology back, that we're just protecting ourselves, we're protecting who we are. And, a bit of pride probably going in with that.
Oof, a
And
lot of
so,
pride.
yeah, a lot of pride. And, and I think that we sometimes internalize that to the point that it's going to be very detrimental to us or it's going to harm us in some way. And one of the things that we don't realize is that holding on to that apology really hurts us more than it hurts anyone else. I mean, when you think
Mm.
about the peace of mind that we don't have because we haven't apologized, and when you think about some of the guilt and that goes in with that, I don't think we think about those things when it comes down to whether we're going to apologize or not.
Yeah, and the analogy that it brings to mind for me, it brings to mind a time where I did something really dumb. And I was at my grandparents' house, and I decided I was going to slide down the porch rail, the rail off the front porch, on my stomach. I was going to slide down it to get to the ground because I didn't want to go down the steps. And mind you, this was just a porch made out of regular old pine 2x4s. It was old. It wasn't smooth. So I go to slide down it. And of course, I get a splinter in my stomach, like right there in my stomach. And instead of wanting to go inside and admit that I'd done something stupid, and I'm calling myself stupid here because it really was. I kept it to myself, and I was enduring the pain of still having the splinter, poking in my stomach up underneath the skin, hurting every time I moved, irritating me, when I could have easily gone in and just told my grandma and grandpa, like, hey, I slid down the rail. I've got this splinter. Can you help me get it out? That's kind of the analogy I see of when we hold on and not making the apology. It's like we've got a splinter. Instead of enduring the temporary discomfort of having to pull that splinter out, we let it stay in there and we let it bother us and irritate us and fester. And that's exactly what happens when we just try to sit on that apology.
Yeah, I think we internalize that it's, like I said, it's going to diminish our standing somehow, and I guess in some situations maybe it will, depending on the severity of the incident that took place. But just to apologize is really not an admission of weakness. And I think you probably learned that without telling your grandparents. I mean, you were suffering a whole lot more having that splinter aggravating you than if you had just, come clean and said, "Hey, this is what happened."
Hmm.
Um, but the whole apology situation it's not a sign of weakness at all. I think it's more a sign of strength because it takes a very strong person to admit that they have, done something to offend someone else and want to take, ownership of that. So um I think the refusal to apologize it's really just punishing you more
Hmm.
than it's punishing anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leans into that common thread that we always talk about of comfort versus discomfort. We're avoiding discomfort when we hold on to it. And we're trying to avoid discomfort But what we don't realize we're doing is creating more discomfort for ourselves spread out over a larger period of time and has more impact, more impactful results the longer that we sit on it. But you mentioned it's not a sign of weakness. I do believe that we shy away from it because at least speaking for myself, that it can instill feelings of vulnerability. And it can also be viewed as, or if, internalized as, I'm admitting that I'm guilty. I'm admitting that I'm wrong. And sometimes that's just a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I think there's some guilt that goes with that thought too. Like you don't want to admit, um, that you wronged someone because that does give you a feeling of guilt. And um, I think it's part of that guilt that really disrupts your peace.
Mhm.
And, it can lead to other physical conditions if you hold on to it. I mean, I think about some family members, and I can imagine that there are some folks who are listening to us who can relate to this. But family members who have had grudges between
Oh,
each
man.
other for years, neighbors, I think about the old movies, the Hatfield and McCoys, right? Just had a generations of distance between folks because of one simple thing that you could just apologize for and talk through and work out and move on.
Yeah, it sounds like you're speaking with some lived experience over there, Nude. You had some instances where you held on to an apology longer than you should have, and you kind of felt those negative effects.
Oh, first and foremost, I recognize it now because, when in my younger years, I would, be upset about different things, and it was more like, I don't need you anyway, kind of thing, and you just move on. But as you
Right.
mature, you learn, and I think you can identify things in yourself where things just don't sit right. Especially, I think if it's something that you feel really passionate about, I mean, that just kinda surfaces as time moves on, it just has a way of sneaking up in your mind, and then before you know it, you're down this black hole of guilt and frustration and anger and all those other emotions. And so, to answer your question, I think, I've had some situations, in workplaces and that where things just were very frustrating for me, and I got pretty upset and held on to it, and it just really affected my outcomes, and I
Mhm.
had to realize that. Um and and once you do realize it, I think that's half the battle. I think also, once I did realize that I was holding on to this guilt, because I didn't apologize or someone didn't apologize to me, um, I was able to let it go. I mean, because sometimes you have to apologize to a person that you can't even see. That person is long gone out of your
Oof.
life,
Mm.
and you're still holding on to that situation. And so, sometimes you just have to forgive people from a distance and be okay with that and move on.
Yeah, and I think we also trap ourselves with that distance thing that you talked about, where we try to fool ourselves into thinking out of sight, out of mind. This person's not in my life anymore. This person's not around anymore. So I don't have to worry about apologizing. But guess what? When your paths cross again, like they most likely could, all that stuff is going to come rushing back. That's what the young folks today, they say that's on site. Like, "Oh, don't let me see you, because when I do, it's on site." And those feelings just start come rushing back in, and we've trapped ourselves for much longer than we needed to with something that we could have let go a long time ago.
I like that, on-site. I have not heard that before. So,
Oh
um,
goodness,
ha
yeah.
having, teenagers and that around you, I guess that helps me to, keep up with the lingo. I appreciate that, Frankie.
Dude, I live with them and I can't keep up. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Nuge. I don't know how much you're going to get through osmosis from me, because I live in the house with them every day, and I'm still like, what's that
Yeah.
mean?
Well, the net effect of what we just talked about is, we gotta realize that the, holding on to grudges really has a physical and a mental effect and an emotional effect on us. And I know that some people even have outward signs of
Mm,
physical ailments because they refuse to let go. And I had a friend, or I have a friend, he's still alive. I haven't talked to him in a while. But one of the things he always said was, you got to break things down to its least common denominator. It's like, what is the reason why you're holding on to this thing,
mhm.
whatever it is? And I think once you do that and you determine how small, in some cases, that issue is, and you think about how that's affecting you outwardly with your health,
Mm.
um, it's time to make a serious decision and decide whether or not, your health is more important than holding on to a grudge for somebody else.
Yeah, it ties back into what we've talked about in previous episodes, the impact of that negativity, that impact of stress, the cortisol response, how our body deals with it. And if we're just holding on to that grudge, guess what? We're holding on to that stress and all the negative effects that go with it. And for sure, you see your blood pressure spike up. You might see some weight gain. You might see just fatigue because you're mentally tired going back and forth through all these things, dealing with the situation in your mind. Because I know sometimes like if I got into an argument with someone and the argument ended, I'll spend the rest of the day replaying that argument in my head. It's like, you know what? When they said this, I should have said that instead of this. Man, I missed an opportunity to get the upper
Facts.
hand in the argument, and I'll be in the shower the next day, still mulling it over, mad because I missed an opportunity to say something that I should have said in the argument, and that's wasted mental capacity. That's wasted emotional
Yep.
energy right there.
And those are facts, sir. And the truth behind it is, you know, we take that on, right? We let that situation take our power, right?
Mm,
And I think once we make the decision to apologize, we regain some of that power, but we also have an opportunity to repair that relationship, right? We get to repair that connection that we have with that individual or those individuals. And if they are people that we really care about, then I think that it's incumbent upon us to show our maturity and go ahead and make that situation right.
Yeah, you mentioned something here that I think may bring a distinction into the decision making process for us and for our listeners. You said, this is somebody, that you care about. Some people may ask the question, well, Nuge, what about a situation where I'm fine with this person no longer being in my life, or it's somebody that I don't know that well, and the effort and the discomfort that I would have to endure to deal with this apology is greater than the value of the connection to me.
And I think that that is definitely rolling through the minds of folks that are listening to this podcast and some folks who may pick it up later. But you got to weigh how much that's really going to affect you. Just like you mentioned before, just a minute ago, about replaying that situation. That situation will replay in your mind day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. 5 years from now, if you're still replaying that same scenario, was it really worth it to hold on to?
Good point. Yeah, good point.
So I don't know. You have to decide that for yourself. For me, in the point of life where I am, the maturity that I have gained or how I have grown, to me, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Um, but you have to learn that for yourself. But hopefully, you make the right decision on it. So now, Frankie, we're going to get into a topic that I think, or a part of apology that I think is really, really important, and I think it's one that folks don't um, really pay attention to when it comes down to apologizing. And that is, the difference between I'm sorry versus I apologize.
Mm,
And there's a very good distinction between the two. So I'm sorry is tied more to you, right? It's how you feel, it's your
mhm,
emotion of how you feel about the situation. And, I apologize is really stating what you did or confirming or admitting something that you did to offend another. So
Taking accountability for it.
taking accountability for it, you know?
Mhm.
So like, for instance, if you say something like, um, I'm sorry you feel that way. I mean, are you really apologizing for something that was said or done? Or are
No.
you just expressing your emotion or your feeling that, honestly, I don't really care that happened to
Yeah.
you, and I don't care that you feel that way, right?
Yeah, that's some passive aggressive stuff right there.
Yeah, but we don't think about it, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
sorry is just something that we say almost automatically,
Yeah,
right? When a
it's
situation
reflexive.
happens. Yeah, it is. It is very reflexive. Because if you bump into somebody on the street, this is, oh man, I'm sorry, right? But that's not really a deep rooted apology. It's really more about how you feel. It's more about your emotion than it is about the other person.
And I like how you framed that, where you tied "I'm sorry" to our emotional state about how we feel, because one of the things that we can always hide behind is our feelings. Our feelings act
Mhm.
like this facade or this a shield of sorts where we can say, well, you can't tell me how to feel. You can't invalidate my feelings, just like we can't invalidate somebody else's feelings. So it's a nice warm security blanket that doesn't cost us anything to kind of throw it out, because we're making a statement of feeling rather than taking ownership of wrongdoing.
Absolutely. And so conversely, when you apologize, at least in my mind, when you apologize and mean it, let's be real with that part. When you apologize and mean it, I think it's something that you have internalized, that you recognize that you have done something to offend someone else, and you truly want to, make amends. So instead of "I'm sorry you feel that way," it's like, hey, I know I did whatever this thing is that I did, and I know that it affected you this way or that. Um, and I know that it affected you emotionally, but it may have also affected something that you were intended to do. So if I'm supposed to pick you up to take you to the airport and you need to be there by 6 and I don't get to your house till 6, well, that's a real problem, right? So, hey, I'm sorry that I was that late. I know I was supposed to have you here by 6, and um, you know, what can I do to make it up to you? That kind of thing. But then me being me, if I'm supposed to be at the airport at 6 and you're not there by a certain time, I'm probably catching an Uber. But my point is, if you make that type of a commitment and you don't follow through the way that you should follow through, it really is impactful to the other person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've alluded to it before, that whole notion of, we should do what we say we will do. And when we fall short of that, we've got to be able to, be grown enough, as the old folks would say, oh, you think you grown. We got to be grown enough to own that and admit when we've made a mistake or admit when we've come up short, rather than trying to explain it away.
That's right. And, as you mentioned, that I apologize is ownership of what you have done. And I think that that has a greater weight when you are speaking to someone that you've offended than just, I'm sorry. I mean, sometimes I'm sorry is almost like, hey man, what time is it? You know. Um, but when you say I apologize and mean it, I think it's more of a impactful conversation for the other person. And again, going back to, if you really care about that person, whether it's somebody that you're close to or not, if you just really care, if you're just being human about the situation and being mature about a situation, I apologize is probably the better avenue.
Absolutely. And it still amazes me, though, we've talked about the connotation of these two words being very different, but they're interpreted. Sometimes people try to use them interchangeably or assume that they're interchangeable. You shared some information with me prior to us talking about the origins of those words, about the etymology of the two words. I think it'd be good for you to kind of share that with our listeners. The origins of "I'm sorry" and apology.
Well, I'm sorry traces back to, and I'm going to refer to my notes here. I'm sorry refers back to the Old English word. It's called sarig or sarig, Sarig, meaning distressed or grieved or full of sorrow, right? Um, and so again, it kind of connotates an emotional feeling versus taking ownership, right? So when you say I'm sorry, what you're really saying is that I feel grief,
Mm.
or I have been grieved, right? I feel grief. Um, and so it's actually about your feelings and not about the other person. And then, the flip side of that is I apologize is actually from the ancient Greek, where the word apologia, which literally means a speech in defense, right? And the root apo means away from, and logos means speech. So in its original form, it was a formal reason to defend your action or defend your position. And so, over time versus defending yourself or defending your position, it became owning your actions, which in a sense is kind of the same thing, right? Your
Uh-huh.
position, your actions, right? Defending yourself, but owning the actions that you have taken on, right? So, at the end of the day, I apologize in its DNA is really about taking ownership. So that's kind of the origins of the word. And again, I think, early on we were taught to say, I'm sorry. I think that most of us were taught to say, I'm sorry. I
Hmm.
apologize is something that you just really have to, I guess, relearn in a different way
Right.
and internalize.
Yeah, I mean, when we break it down like that and we look at the origins of the words, the difference becomes crystal clear. But like we talked about with habits, if we want to make that shift from that reflexive "I'm sorry" to really taking ownership and legitimately apologizing, it's going to take some reps. We got to get some reps in and give some intentionality on that focus to just making sure that, all right, let me see if I can deprioritize the word sorry in my personal lexicon and my personal vocabulary and appropriately use the word I apologize. That's going to take some effort. I know it's going to take some effort for me because I am just as guilty as the next person of, something going, oh, I'm sorry, or my bad, depending on who I'm talking to. So I need to focus some intentionality on that endeavor.
And you are 100% correct, because I have had this conversation with a cousin of mine. And this goes back some years. And this is one of the things that was very, very important to her when it came down to apologies and saying I'm sorry. Because she took on the understanding way back then that, I'm sorry is a very light-hearted approach to an apology. And it's not as sincere as uh I apologize, right? There's
Mm.
not as much thought that goes into I'm sorry as it is to I apologize. And so it's something that has been with me for a while. And I know, to your point, when I had that conversation with her, it resonated with me. And so I have been practicing that for quite some time. And so I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it, but I am a lot better at uh the distinction and when it is appropriate to use.
Yeah, takes practice.
It takes practice. So, to our audience, the next time that you're in a situation, as Frankie alluded to, think about before you speak whether you are going to utilize I'm sorry or I apologize in the context that it should be used in. I'm not saying that if you bump into somebody on the street that, you need to say I apologize. Maybe you will. I think in that situation, like, hey man, I'm sorry is not inappropriate, but, that whole "I apologize" is definitely something to think about when there's a, real deep-rooted situation between 2 people or a few people that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, and at its core, an apology is a difficult conversation. We had an entire episode dedicated to the concept of difficult conversations. And I would be hard pressed to think of a time where I needed to apologize that it wasn't a difficult conversation. So I encourage listeners, if you didn't catch the difficult conversations episode, this would be a good time to go back and kind of check that one out because a lot of the same concepts that we talked about for navigating difficult conversations can help us to take that bold step to apologizing rather than just saying, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And, in some situations, I think I'm sorry is really a cop out from, doing what you really should do and engaging in conversation with someone and really taking ownership and apologizing for a situation. So, um, that's something to consider as well. So now, Frankie, we have something to share with the audience. That we have dubbed the 6 mechanics of real apology. And I can't really say that we dubbed it. We kind of stole it from, we stole it from a professional. Um, and that person is Dr. Roy Lewicki from Ohio State University. And so he has identified the 6 mechanics of a real apology. And so we're going to go through these with our audience. And then, I do want to share that we have placed these 6 mechanics of a real apology on our website. And so you can go to thisispsipod.com/apology, and you will be directed to, or you will see immediately the 6 mechanics of a real apology. And so we're just going to go through these right quick. So the first one is expression of regret. So I am sorry, simple, direct, and genuine, but just you have to express that you did something, um, and that you are, remorseful about it.
Yeah, and then it's interesting too because it's a very nuanced distinction because we're saying here, all right, we're trying to do an apology, but the first thing we're going to say is I'm sorry, and that also tells us that I'm sorry just by itself isn't enough, but it is a good start to the conversation because we're expressing how we feel about the situation. It doesn't totally cover all of our bases for what we need to talk about, in the apology, but it's the great opening salvo.
Absolutely. And then the next step is explanation of what went wrong. So briefly describe what happened without making excuses, right? Goes back to ownership. Don't make any excuses, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And that,
let me jump in on the
yeah,
excuses
sure.
piece because that is a big hairy problem, as we would say in the software space. Because it's real easy when you start talking about what went wrong to talk about what somebody else did versus what you did. That attributing it to somebody else versus looking at our own contribution to the situation. So we need to look at our contribution and focus on that because it's so easy to get caught up in that. Well, you did this. And so since you did that, this is why I did what I did. Don't do that. Excuses are tools of the incompetent used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments to nothingness.
All right, then maybe we should put that down in the notes as well, because that's a good statement. We might circle back to that at the end. The third piece is acknowledgement of responsibility. So this is a very important step. Right? It's not my fault, or it's not. No, 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 I shouldn't say it's not my fault. It is my fault. It's
Right.
my fault. I made a mistake. Um, and as Frankie said about the excuses, I mean, no if, ands, or buts, no qualifiers, right? I did it.
Mhm.
I apologize, right? It's my fault. I made a mistake, right? So just, do that and go on to, step number 4, which is declaration of repentance. I know this hurt you and I genuinely regret it, right?
Repent.
Exactly. Acknowledge that you hurt the other person in whatever way that is. Um, and then offer to repair, which is another important step. How can I make it right? Or here's what I'm going to do to make it right.
Mm.
Right. Um, and that's where, back in the day, we would say talk is cheap, right? That's where your
Oof.
talk becomes action, right?
Right.
You follow through on what you're saying. And then request for forgiveness, right? Um, you may not feel comfortable asking for forgiveness. Um, and I guess, research shows from this scientist, research shows that this is the least critical element. You can leave it out, but it does go a long ways if you're being genuine about your apology. And it could easily open a door for additional dialogue to help strengthen, I think, your relationship.
And I think that's the key, strengthening the relationship. If if this is one of those relationships that is really important to us, then forgiveness has to be part of the equation if the relationship is going to be maintained. But I think the pivotal piece here is that we can't expect forgiveness to be automatic. It's that person's decision as to whether or not they're going to forgive us. All we can do is ask. And like they say back in the day, a closed mouth don't get fed. So if you want forgiveness, you need to ask for it.
Absolutely. And as you said, Frankie, you can't expect that the other person is going to feel the way that you do, and that they will automatically forgive you.
Mhm.
Right. Sometimes, these offenses that we make take time to repair. And so all you can do is be mature enough to make the apology in a genuine sense. But sometimes it's not going to be immediate. It just depends on the situation, depends on the person. And you just need to be ready for that. But once you make the apology, at least you can feel good inside yourself that you've taken the necessary steps, you were genuine about it, um, and the other person knows, at least knows, maybe not feel it at that moment, but at least knows that, you came at them um, genuinely to make amends. So
Yeah.
that's a good point that you brought up, Frankie. I like that.
Yeah, and that's where the release happens too. That's when we're done making that apology, that's when that weight and that stress that we talked about, that's when we start to feel it sort of fall away. It's kind of like carrying around a bag of bricks. At that point,
Mm.
we've sat the bag of bricks down on the ground and we've put that weight down, and the ball is really in the court of the person that we've apologized to. I mean, there may still be other follow-up actions that we need to go through on our end to, kind of help continue talking through things if it's necessary with the person we apologize to. But the heavy lifting is done.
All right. So now just to reiterate, excuse me. So now just to reiterate, you're hurting yourself if you hold on to an apology that you need to make. It's not doing you any good, not for your mental health, not for your physical health, because these things can fester into bigger issues that you probably don't want in your life. And, some of these things can spill over into other relationships. So you need to consider that as well. So, just remember that it hurts you. I mean, you have guilt, you have shame, um, you're emotionally distant. So, holding on to an apology that you need to make is really hurtful to you and those that are around you. And so I encourage you to make the decision to do your part. I mean, it is a choice to make that apology. It is your choice to do that or not. And so I encourage you to make that choice to do your part and, stand in front of that person and make that apology. Some folks will say, well, I text them.
Mm.
How impersonal is that when it comes down to something as serious as understanding and caring about another person's feeling about your situation, about your relationship? How impersonal is that text?
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful there too, Nooch, because we're of a particular generation and a particular mindset, and the weight and the value of a text for the younger generation is a lot more than you and I would interpret it as. But I agree wholeheartedly. A text is insufficient, but for some people, oh, they took the time to text me, and I have a written evidence of what they said and how they feel. For some people, that may be sufficient.
Well, I resent the fact that you talked about, younger people. Like, dude, I'm young. I am however many years young.
There you
I
go,
just
sir.
want you to know that.
D- My,
But your point,
Nooch, I apologize for insinuating that you were old. I
I,
saw how that made you feel, and I regret that I made you feel that way.
I appreciate that, Frankie. I do accept your apology. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your forgiveness.
Very timely, sir. Very timely. Um, But I get your point, right? I do get your point. The generation of today is much different. They communicate differently, and that whole text thing may be, perfectly fine. I still believe, though, no matter how old you are, standing in front of someone and having that conversation about an apology has a whole lot more weight, goes a whole lot farther in building a good relationship. Just my take, just my personal opinion on it. So,
Yeah. No arguments here.
all right. So for our audience, Frankie, we're going to issue a challenge to our audience
All right.
because we know how our audience likes challenges, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So within the next 24 hours, this is a 24-hour challenge. Think of a person you owe an apology to. For some of us, it may take a few minutes. For others, it probably will take seconds. But this is an exercise that I think that we can all do. And so think of a person that you owe an apology to. And within 24 hours, reach out to that person, call them up on the phone, meet them in person. And as Frankie said, text messages. However, I do believe that face to face or at least a phone call is much more impactful. And then use at least 3 of the steps that we talked about. And I will cover those for you one more time, right quick. First one is expression of regret, explanation of what went wrong, acknowledge of responsibility. Make sure you acknowledge that you were offensive, declaration of repentance, offer to repair, and request forgiveness. So use at least 3 of those in your apology to the person that you need to make that apology to, right? Frankie, what do you think?
I think that's a pretty steep challenge, Nuge, especially if there's an apology that we've been carrying for quite some time. However, I think our listeners are up for the challenge.
Very good. And I hope that our listeners are. And when you're making that decision, make sure that you weigh, if you decide not to take the challenge, make sure you weigh the effect that it will take on you if you don't. I think it'll be healthy for you. And it'll be healthy for the other individual. And as Frankie and I always say, we are not licensed therapists. We are just speaking from personal experience. This topic came to mind because it's something that I think is important to everybody. It may not be top of mind like some other things in our life, some other emotions in our life, some other situations in our life. However, um, it's something that we have experienced, and so that's where we come from. We come from personal experience of 2 guys just sitting here in front of you and having a conversation. So, um, by all means, I hope that you take that to heart. So, with that, we are at the end of this episode, and I am going to ask Frankie, as he does so eloquently at the end of each episode, is to tell everyone where they can find the PSI Effect podcast. Frankie?
So just remember, Nuge gave us the address for a special page that we have. It's thisIspsipod.com/apology. And that's where you can go to get the list, the 6 mechanics of an apology and some additional information related to today's episode. So that's at our website, thisIspsipod.com/apology, gets you the special content. Also on our website, you can find all the information around how to get the audio form of our podcast, see all the different podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon. Subscribe and follow so you don't miss when we drop new episodes. You can also see full video of our episodes on YouTube as well as shorts. You can find us by searching This Is the PSI Effect Podcast, or use our handle at This Is PSI Pod, which is also our handle for social media, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. This Is PSI Pod. Hit us up. We'd love to hear how the challenge goes for you. And, before I pass it back to you to close this out, Nuge, I just want to remind folks, holding on to an apology, holding on to a difficult conversation is like holding on to a hand grenade after you've pulled the pin. You've got to do something with it. If you hold on to it, it's only going to hurt you. If you throw it recklessly, it's going to cause some destruction somewhere else. If you're going to throw it behind somebody so that it blows them towards you. It blows you closer together so you can talk about what really matters.
That was awesome, Frankie. Thank you for that. All right, everybody, you are a good group. Frankie and I really appreciate you being here. And just remember that setbacks are temporary and comebacks are indeed legendary. And until next time, go out there and be brave, apologize, and rise on purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PSI Effect Podcast. This show doesn't happen without you, and you can connect with us via Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our website at thisIspsipod.com and find us on YouTube and social media at This Is PSI Pod. That's at This Is PSI Pod. Until next time, remember, be brave and rise on purpose.